I'm Mike DeVerde. I'm the rocking chair of the OmniFuturists group. We're going to have another discussion about bioshelters and our book today. The agenda here, we're going to start with Gennady has been very generous in inviting David Wood and I on to the Enlightenment Salon on January 28th. We're going to discuss the book. And so this gives us all a deadline and a target to prepare the book and everything else that goes along with it. So one of the things that we obviously have to have before we have the meeting is get the book onto Amazon, the ebook onto Amazon. So we'll be looking to our managing editor, Alan, to give us an update on status, what he needs to do, what he still needs to do, what the authors need to do, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So that's one thing. Obviously, if we're going to talk about the book has to be available. Secondly, we do have a website. I did purchase OmniFuturists.com, but we're going to get someone. Alora is going to be the webmaster, and she has volunteered to get bids on preparing that professionally. We're just see how much it costs. So she's going to work that. Go ahead, Ada.
I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I've tentatively mentioned this to Osinakachi from the TAFS, Transdisciplinary Agora. He is a little bit off internet in Nigeria, but last time we spoke, he was looking to help with social media and webmastering. I'm sure he would ask for some price, but also I thought of Arzu. Remember him?
I do.
I'm going to try to reach out to him and see if he'll be interested to play with our website a little bit and help out Alora. He had some really good work done.
What do you
think about that?
Yeah, would you do me a favor and contact Alora and see how she feels about it? Because she's the one who brought up the idea of having someone, and I'm willing. What I asked for was some bids because I have no idea what it would take for somebody, site creator, to prepare it professionally, and we'll just see what happens. You know, I'll get some bids and we'll talk about whether or not I'm willing to spend that kind of money to prepare the website. So we'll just see.
Yeah.
Alora is the one, though, please contact her and discuss it with her. And again, like she's not feeling well, so let's give her until next week before we bring that up. Okay, give her a chance.
And
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's a very good suggestion. We do want to include other people who already have that capability. Okay.
Yeah, we'll try.
Thank you. Good. Sure. And then, you know, Alora is taking each of these recorded meetings and placing them onto YouTube. So we have the YouTube site. So one of the things we want to do before January 28th is have each of the authors of each of the chapters do like a 10-minute summary of their chapter. Because we know there's a lot of people who don't feel like sitting there and actually reading a book. They'd like to hear what the topic is in 10 minutes, like it was a TED Talk. Okay, so that, you know, everybody's got their own flavor. So let's, that's something else that we need to get going. And then, of course, plenty of social media buzz on it. Now, I'm committed to ranked choice voting. This group is a sociocracy. It's not a dictatorship. And I do want to do some ranked choice voting. Now, ahead of us, we need to select the book title and the book cover art. And I'm going to suggest that I've found an apparently free app for ranked choice voting. RCV123, this is a quote, is a free service. So there's no reason not to set up as many test elections as you want and give them the try. So I like the idea of using some of these votes for like book titles and book covers as practice for our sociocracy. And, you know, for volunteers for all the work that we have ahead of us, you know, Alora is working on the website prep estimate. I'm going to ask her, she's going to listen to this later. We already sent out an inquiry letter. I'll talk about that later. I'm going to ask her to send the same kind of letter to Biolin Research I was just talking about that ranked choice voting app, and I'm going to ask, and it's not just because you're online here with us tonight, Jason, but I had written you down already. Are you at all interested in being the captain of this RCV app? We need somebody who can evaluate this app, and you as an officer in the USTP, you're very familiar with ranked choice voting. Tell me whether or not, think about it. I'll send you the website. You take a look at it and see whether or not you're interested. You have time and energy for something like this. And what I'd be looking to do is just run a couple practice sessions on this free app. This group is maybe 24 people. It's not a large group. Run one vote on possible book titles, another one on, I think we've got like on the order of a dozen different types of cover art options. Art Ramon did one version, I did another. Art is having a showing tonight. That's why he's not with us. He's showing off some of his art. So, anyway, we do need to select that so that we can get the book ready and online. All right. So think about that, Jason. And if it has no appeal to you, then somebody will. Okay. But I thought of you right away.
Well, it does, and I'll be honest with you. The only reason why I haven't gone more towards that area in the USTP is because I just I didn't. I thought maybe there might eventually be a potential problem with things being too centralized. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be like the vice chairman, legislative director, and like the guy in charge of all the voting and stuff too. You know, just the same reason why maybe Gennady shouldn't really be the guy that's in charge of all that stuff too. But then there's nobody else to do it. So it's like, I don't know. But for this group, it'd be fine, yeah.
I have no trouble delegating, my friend. So if you are unwilling, we will find somebody who is interested in trying it out. Okay, so please, you're the first person I thought of. I think you're the right person for this. But you know, everybody's got their own thing where they want to or don't want to, and so. And then I was talking earlier about I'm listing out volunteer stuff. Alan is our managing editor, so he's to get the book on Amazon. And I'm going to ask Alan when he gets a chance to survey each of the authors to see which of them are willing to do that 10-minute video, that sort of TEDx summary of their chapters. So like Luis, I see you online now. Can you come off mute and say, would you be willing to do a 10-minute video summary of your chapter?
Oh yeah, I could do that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I could do that.
Hey, I think that would be great. I was saying earlier, David Wood and I will be on the USTP on January 28th. And so I'm trying to drive us to completion with everything about the book before that. One of the things could be YouTube videos, summaries. I want to say that either Maura or Alora suggested this I think Maura is very big on the 10-minute video versions. Maybe it was Alora. I'll have to ask them which one thought it was the best approach, but it wasn't my idea, but I think it's a really good one. Okay. I'm a reader. Go ahead, Ada.
Am I a pain or what? While I'm thinking about it, and maybe while you're doing your videos, for example, my daughter has a little issue with auditory understanding, and those closed captions really, really help. So if it's something you got to do while you're recording it, please do so, and please remember that setting. It actually helps me too.
You know what? I'm thinking that Alora has taught me that if you do it the right way, and she knows how to do it, when you load it on YouTube, it'll automatically generate a transcript. And I don't know the quality of it, but that's something we will definitely check on. That's a good point. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay. And then, so going down my list of agenda things, so I want to switch a little bit off of the book for a little while and talk about bioshelter. Alora, of course, has done great work on getting us in touch with some of the Canadian sources for biomaterials, biocomposites. And so I had a long discussion yesterday with Dr. Bishnu Acharya. He's at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, so that's Alora's hometown. He has already written some papers on biochar biocomposites. He has some groups who are doing research with the group I mentioned earlier, the company called Titan Carbon Smart that's in Craik, Saskatchewan. And he had a PhD candidate who just finished his thesis in May, and he was using biochar, and Jason Geringer beat him to the punch. This guy did hemp biocomposites. Okay, and so I'm right now reading the PhD thesis. It's about, I don't know, 250 pages long that this gentleman wrote. It's like a series of technical articles, research papers that he wrote, put together on the characteristics of hemp biocomposites and how biochar particles in it improve the characteristics. They actually used a bioepoxy. So the epoxy is the glue, and the fibers are hemp. And then in addition, they included biochar particles in that mix. So they take the glue epoxy. It's biologically, it's from plant sources for the epoxy, and they take the biochar, which is plant material. Okay, I don't know if you guys remember, but I made some biochar in the backyard the other day. So let me hold up a piece. Okay, it started with this kind of wood, and you put it into an aluminum can in heat, and it's not showing up too well because of the dark. But okay, so you leave it in an aluminum can on a fire long enough, and what it does is it drives off all the volatiles. So this wood turns into this biochar. Okay, and so this biochar is almost pure carbon, and if you bury it in the ground, it'll secure the carbon for literally thousands of years. And so when we're talking about too much carbon dioxide in the air, and you talk about carbon sequestration, this is what we're talking about. So there in Alora's hometown of Saskatoon, a researcher has done this research with hemp grown in Saskatchewan, this bioepoxy with this biochar. The biochar was made from something called switchgrass. And he has this long PhD thesis where he's talking about how strong it is. And when Jason mentioned hemp, I compared some of the material properties for hemp versus jute, and they're very similar. Okay, so it turns out that there's multiple interesting sources of plant material for these composites, and there's ongoing research. The opening lines of this PhD thesis, he's saying petrochemical plastics have created a problem in our atmosphere and our climate change. And one of the ways of combating that is to take biochar and stop using the petrochemical plastics and make bioplastics. So and when I talk to Dr. Acharya, that's what he's talking about as well, is it's becoming understood that one of the ways to really deal with climate change is this carbon sequestration with biochar. Okay, so one of the things that I noticed is that there's a company near Edmonton. So if William Marshall hears the YouTube, there is a company near him that I do want him to contact. Their company is actually called Biocomposites Group. Okay, so they're trying to do what we're looking for companies to fabricate biocomposites. That's also what they're doing. Okay, so we're starting to find a collection of these Canadian firms that if we link them together, we might get kind of what we've been discussing. And then, okay, so the list so far is BioLin Research in Saskatoon, Titan Smart Carbon in Craik in Saskatchewan. There's another one I haven't mentioned, Blue Sky Hemp Ventures. Okay, now they're the ones supplying the hemp for one of the articles I read about. This is also in Canada. And then the one I just mentioned, Biocomposites Group. So here's kind of what I'm thinking about, and we'll see what happens is, obviously, Alora there in Saskatoon would be a good contact for these various companies locally around her as we try to find biocomposites and good applications like housing for the homeless, right? Kill two birds with one stone, right? Use a cliche right away. There's going to be other locations with other materials where other people will be like the focal. So Alora's a focal in Canada. Dr. Sharif with jute and the cashew nutshell liquid, the Tulsi bioepoxy. We're hoping Dr. Sharif is a focal point for Bangladesh, perhaps. All of the materials I just mentioned for Bangladesh look like they can be grown in Brazil. So I'm starting to establish contact with engineers in Brazil. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things in the past week is that I did find a good option in the American South. And so as I'm talking about people who are, and you see her smile and the way her face lights up, but we have a focal perhaps for Louisiana, because there's a company called, I always remember it as ABC, American Biocarbon. Okay, they're the ones near you that I think it was on the order of 90 miles west of New Orleans. The company is called American Biocarbon, and they're taking some of the sugarcane bagasse. So that in most of these cases, what I'm looking for are materials that are waste products that we could use for biomaterials. I'm not the only one thinking of this, right? But I started in Canada with flax and linseed oil, and now we're seeing hemp. And by the way, hemp oil is also being used for epoxies. Both of those in Canada. The American South and Louisiana, we've got bagasse. So this is sugarcane. The excess after they squeeze out the sugar out of the sugar cane is called bagasse. And this company, American Biocarbon, is using it to make biochar. And the technical article that I saw was actually written by a group at Mississippi State. So obviously we've got a college, and we're looking for technical expertise across the world, right? Okay, so you got a Mississippi State set of researchers that are doing some good work. You got a company down there making biochar. This is perhaps an American South solution. I will make a side note if our good friend Ben Ballwig gets a chance to hear this. The co-author, there are like 7 authors on the paper I'm referring to, 6 of which were Mississippi State. One was located in, yes, Madison, Wisconsin. So, it's just eerie how each time I find a biocomposite, one of you in this group lives where the researcher is. So, there was a new one today, just before this meeting, that I came across. Oh boy, I think I'm going to forget the name of it. That's how new it is. Hold on a second, because this is actually worthwhile. I'll see if I can. Oh yeah, good. I did find it. Last time we were together, Alan was saying, well, okay, that's great for Canada. What are the folks in California going to grow? Right? Because you don't really think about it, right? I came across something called Ramie today. Ramie. Okay, I've never heard of it before. Kind of like these other things. And when you look at it, you might also look up the fabric. Is traditionally called MOSI, MOSI. Okay. Now, why am I looking at this stuff? In the PhD paper, this fella is listing all the different fibers from weakest to strongest, and this Ramie is the strongest. And this MOSI fabric is well known in China and Korea, but is now being grown in a bunch of different places. And of course, I wrote in today in the BioShelter channel, Alan, towards the end of it, I'm writing to you, and I said, you asked what California could use for BioShelter biocomposites, and the quote is, Ramie is now cultivated in a number of tropical to subtropical climates around the world, including parts of the southeastern U.S. and California. So we need to look at Ramie, hemp, jute, and flax. We've got 4 good fibers for these biocomposites in different parts of the world. Why do I want to do this, right? Not to make my life harder. The idea is you want to use local materials. You don't want to make something in Japan and ship it to France, okay? You don't want to make something in Canada and then ship it to Australia. You want to use local resources, right? So that's primarily what I had in my mind today for the agenda, was go over. We're missing Alan. We needed to see what the status of the authors is, how close we are on the reviews, the edits. Try to encourage everybody to complete their chapters so they can get the book published. Remind the authors that we'd really like them to make YouTube 10-minute videos summarizing their chapter. I think that's, and the BioShelter stuff, we're going to take our time. The interview, the discussion I had with Dr. Acharya was excellent yesterday, and I would expect that Alora will be able to load it on YouTube so that everybody can see what he said. It was a very good presentation that he had. He's now on winter break, and so he will be unavailable till January. So, but we had a good start with him. So I think that's my status for today on the book and BioShelter. Did anybody have any other comments? Ada, Jason, Luis, anything before we go? Because I'm not a fan of having a hour-long meeting just to have an hour-long meeting. Okay, so tell me if you've got something else on your mind. Anyone?
I think we should maybe keep an eye out for like government programs that might help out with what we're doing. You know, I mean, you mentioned carbon sequestration is like, you know, something that I think the government's trying to subsidize or something. We should maybe be also on the lookout for government programs that might subsidize free energy. And I don't want to make the project difficult or anything. There could be maybe something that comes down the line and added after we get something or something. I'm just saying that the energy system of the houses, if that could be sustainable and free energy, and you know, and if you could even turn it from not just energy independent, but an energy producer, then it's like a different category of thing. You know, it's no longer, you know, it would help maybe to keep the whole site sustainable.
I've got 2 responses. I didn't want to cut you off. So number one, earlier, and you may have missed this somewhere in Discord and our discussions. Number one, I had posted a headline from Reuters that said the Biden administration was releasing $2 billion for federal buildings in 39 states. And the whole focus was to reduce carbon content. Okay, $2 billion of U.S. federal money for that. Now, everyone needs to understand that most of the money for this is going to go to big tech, even though big tech is the one that created all these problems, like big oil. Most of the money will be going to them. Okay. They in the article they say, for example, concrete, steel, glass, and something else. Asphalt. Okay. These are materials that if you can add biochar in them, you can sequester tons and tons and tons rapidly, right? And so for these huge buildings or road projects, if they can, and there is a lot of research on how to include biochar in these, because of course you put biochar in concrete. Biochar lasts a long time on its own. Okay, it does not decay. It doesn't get microbial action. Okay, so it lasts by itself in the ground real long. But if you put it in concrete, man, you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? So that's one, is the American US federal money. The second thing that I pointed out is Canada has been working on this for quite a while. And I understood that legislation in Canada is about to release a lot of money for carbon sequestration. Okay. So, and I mentioned this to Dr. Acharya. We don't have the funding. I've said this to Dr. Sharif. We're not going to take out $1 million loan to start this business. We aren't interested in building big factories. We're going to take advantage of what we think about and our connections. Okay. This is where we're going to look to Jasmine to help us get a connection to pallet shelters and to some of the homeless projects and say, hey, we'd like to, and I said this to Dr. Acharya, I said, I'd like to do a prototype. This is one of my goals, is if we identify a good biocomposite material, okay, and suggest to somebody like pallet shelters, hey, if we could build up one of your same pallet shelters, but each of the panels is made out of biocomposite, not fiberglass petrochemicals, as a prototype and a demonstration. Hey, then you can bring in the mayor and the county and say, hey, look at this, it lasts, and it's helping the environment, right? This is where we're going to make our progress. It's not going to be you and I take out loans. No. Okay. Okay. I agree with you. So your point is very well taken. Okay. So that's the first part. Go ahead, Ada. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let me do part two, because he had two good questions. Jason, I really like solar power and geothermal. Okay. I've studied them for a long time. They're big projects. Solar power is obviously going to be a lot easier to implement on some of these small homeless shelter projects. I agree. I think putting solar panels on top of these little pallet shelters is very straightforward and a good solution. Okay. I think that that's very good. I think that there are known solutions to those things. Okay. And so I'd rather we focus our limited energy on the biocomposites for now. Okay. The carbon sequestration and the housing first. Yes, I agree on the solar panels. And I also agree on it can be a money generator for the site because you might generate excess. Maybe not up here in Seattle, right? A little too cloudy, but other parts of the world, yes, that's going to be a big plus, right? Right. Anything else, Jason?
I like the idea of being, the ones who make the connections, like there might be some company that has a, I don't know, prototype generator, and we're like, hey, and maybe they'll make us a deal, or, I mean, I don't want to confuse things, but I'm just agreeing with you. You're going in the right direction, and I totally also agree with we can go slow. If we try to do everything at once, we end up doing nothing. We don't want that. So, yeah, sounds good.
And by the way, I certainly do not want to have a narrow focus for this group. Okay. Right. One of the things I rarely talk about here, but I'm working separately, is we're talking about how to house all these people who've lost their jobs. The other thing is, how do you feed them? And so there's I'm forgetting the term right now, but there's a development near us where they've bought 240 acres of a dairy farm, and they're going to put housing in there. It's an agricultural development, but it's preserving the farmland, right? It's very similar to how I've pitched the Agroforestry Guild, where the folks who are unemployed, you gather them together on maybe 40 acres or 20 acres, and they co-house and they co-work, and they survive the economic singularity of working together like that. Okay. So there's other aspects to what we as a group might end up doing. Because I'm thinking that we want to perhaps create a business here, not just a talking group, not just a group that talks, not just a group that writes, but a group that does things. Okay. That's kind of where I'm headed. There's more to it than just biocomposites. That's for sure. In my mind, there is. And we'll just see, whether or not we can achieve that. What's important is to pick something that we can focus on and get some success first. I do not want to diffuse our efforts. It's not like we have 1,000 engineers here, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I agree that, to keep it focused and just concentrate on one thing and get something done.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it gets, scatterbrained too much.
And, it's worthwhile for me to just point out real quickly to remind people that biochar sounds like one thing, but it's not. It turns out that the feedstock changes what the material is completely. Okay, so mine is made from hemlock, which is a wood that I cut down in my backyard, right? If you make it out of, and for the flax version of biocomposites, I want to use the center kind of woody part of the plant. It's called a chive. Okay, so the outside of that is the fiber, and then at the top of the plant are the oil seeds. So I get biochar out of the center woody part. There's fibers all around it, and then there's oil for the glue, the epoxy, all out of one plant, right? But every biochar ends up having completely different properties depending on what plant you start with and how you process it. The temperature is very critical, right? So there's just one aspect that has a plethora of options, right? Now you mix the fiber with the epoxy, and now you've got another series of choices. It very quickly becomes a large matrix of options. And if you want to look at things properly, you got to evaluate your choices pretty quickly. And I'll give you an example. I started with flax. I came across some biocomposites in Europe that used flax. Okay. Then I got this guy, Jason Geringer, and he says hemp. And I get on the next day, I get on the phone with a researcher, a doctor in charge of a lab at a university. And he says, yeah, we've done some research on hemp fiber with biochar. And I go, that Jason, he knows. So we need to look at a series of options, right? Some are going to work in some places, not in others, right? But this just trying to make some simple composite panels is going to be a lot of effort. We don't have the internal expertise. So now we got to go find the PhD researchers, and the companies that are already making biochar, or the ones who are, it's called decortication. Decortication is how you get the fibers off these kind of woody plants, right? So there's machines that are used to remove it. When you get the fibers off, they're kind of gummy. So now you got to get that gummy stuff off. And then you got to turn these fibers into yarn. And then you got to weave it into a fabric. And then, I mean, you see what I'm saying? There's a long train of people, and these are new material systems. Okay, so this is part of the reason why I'm making sure everybody knows we're not going to do this in a few months. This is going to take a while. Okay. Huh? Yeah. Okay.
Anthony might have a little bit of knowledge in this area.
Okay.
Just saying. I did kind of have a question about the biochar though.
Yeah.
And like whether like how you calculate the carbon sequestration, because like with that sawgrass or whatever it was that you're saying, no, they're going to burn that off, just burn it. So that's all of the CO2 is going in the air. But then if you take it up and turn it into biochar, well, then you can sequester it. But what if it's something that is not going to get burnt, is just going to lay there and then go into the earth? And then if you were to take that and make it out of biochar, wouldn't it maybe be kind of putting more CO2 in? Because I mean, whenever you turn it into biochar, you're using some kind of energy. It's probably kicking off some kind of, like if you put a tin can in the fire or whatever, that fire is generating, CO2. So I mean, it almost seems like, well, and I don't know. I guess it would have to depend on the material, but if the material was just gonna like rot there, and and go and be sequestered anyway, is that really saving CO2 in the long run? I mean,
So those are excellent questions. Let me try to kind of simplistically answer those. Okay. Whenever a plant dies, right? Well, let's start with this. For the plant to grow, it's taking carbon dioxide out of the air and using the carbon out of the carbon dioxide to create the wood, the branches, the leaves, the roots. Okay. So it's locking up some carbon. But as soon as it dies, the microbial action that turns that into decay is going to release that carbon back up into the atmosphere. Okay.
Yeah, but all of it? I mean, isn't that where coal comes from?
Almost all of it. And if you look through my presentation, I stole a very good graphic. You have to think of it this way. Nature is balanced. So the cycle is perfect in the normal environment. Whatever is in the carbon dioxide coming out of the air into the plants, they die and then they release it back in. Otherwise, over thousands and millions of years, either all the carbon dioxide would go away because it was all getting sequestered by all the plants on the planet, or it was going to be releasing it all and it would be nothing but carbon dioxide in the air. So it's a balanced system until man comes along. Is that fair, Jason?
Yeah, or the big earthquakes that, like, there's a theory that was the Cambrian extinction, I think, was.
Wait, okay.
But
don't
anyway.
go there. Don't go there, because I know what you're talking about. Okay, the volcanic eruptions. Okay, let's not do that one. Okay, because that's geological. Let's just talk about how the plants process carbon dioxide. Okay, so it's a perfect cycle, right? Just simplistically, it's a perfect cycle. All right. Now, if you are processing, not like Mike in his backyard on his wood fire, the industrial versions of how you make biochar, think of it this way. Even my campfire, when the wood is heated up, it's not the wood that's actually on fire. The flames are not the wood, okay? The flames are because you've warmed up the wood enough so that it releases what they call either wood gas or syngas. inside the wood are materials that when you heat it, it releases things like methane, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. But the methane, for example, think of the methane that's released. That's what's creating the flame. It's actually not the wood itself. The wood is releasing like a burst balloon, right? It's releasing a gas that's flammable. The heat ignites that, and that's the flame you're seeing, okay? So what they do in the industrial versions is they heat it up in a can, right? The gases, the flammable gases are driven off by the heat. They suck those gases up, bring them down below, ignite them, so it's a self-sustaining system. The heat that generates it's called pyrolyzation, right? The pyrolysis is driven by the biomass off-gassing.
Wouldn't that, I mean, you'd probably still have to add at least a little bit because there's like the law of thermodynamics.
You're
I mean,
right.
you're probably going to lose some.
You're right. You have to heat it up to the point where it starts releasing that. Okay, but I'm trying to tell you that most of the energy to create biochar comes actually from the material itself. Okay, it helps if you've dried it out very well because by drying it, you have already had the atmosphere remove a lot of the moisture in it. Okay, and then when I've got a piece of biochar like this is almost pure carbon. So if you know that organic materials are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, right? And so if I have only carbon left here, what has been driven off? Hydrogen and oxygen. So a lot of steam comes out, but also some methane, CH4, right? And then that ignites, right? So methane, okay? So this is almost pure carbon, and this is why it doesn't decay in the ground. And of course, how do we know that it doesn't decay in the ground? 1,000 years ago or so, the Amazonian indigenous peoples, they'd have a campfire or they'd do slash and burn, they'd burn the forest or whatever. At their campfire, this sort of material would build up and it would enrich. It turns out the Amazon has really bad soil. I didn't know this. It's really low in organic materials. It's really poor materials for growing anything. And so what's happened is we archaeologists or whatever have gone in and they've dug up some of these fire pits from 1,000 years ago, and they've dated the biochar that's there, and it's like 1,000 years old. It's been in the ground for 1,000 years and it hasn't changed. So this isn't a case of like some modern scientist is making stuff up. We're digging up what the indigenous folks did 1,000 years ago. Okay, so this is how we kind of know that one of the authentic ways to sequester carbon is biochar. As versus a lot of the billions are going to be spent. You're going to see these huge machines that suck air out of the atmosphere, and they're going to tell you that they're pumping it down deep into the earth, and it will geologically, chemically combine with the rocks down there, staying forever. Okay. Very, very expensive projects, colossal size projects. My understanding is that 90% of the actual carbon sequestration that has already occurred, all of it is biochar. Biochar is the only effective means so far in carbon sequestration. When you see these big articles about colossal industrial carbon sequestration projects, they're engineers' dreams. And when I read about them, a lot of them after a few years have stopped because they're not cost effective. Okay, so here's why we are going all in on biochar on this. Okay. I don't know if I answered all your questions, Jason, but you were asking very good ones about, okay, how do we know we're really sequestering carbon? By the way, when I took my whole farm planning class last year, I did bring up carbon sequestration. And I thought that, soil organic carbon was the right way to sequester. And he was trying to explain to me that, okay, temporarily the carbon is located in the plant or in the roots or whatever, but then fungus and bacteria attack it, they release the carbon. So it doesn't last that long. Okay. So.
See, yeah, I remember when the biomass power plants came out or whatever, and everybody, and there was, I won't say everybody, but I remember there's this line is, oh, this is eco-friendly. We're not burning coal. It's a biomass plant, and that and ended up being where they're just like burning trees and whatever, and it's like that's not really all that better. You know what I mean? And so I think I'm just a little bit leery to check in a little more about that because sometimes with that calculation of what CO2 are you actually pulling out, it can be tricky.
Right. So I've got an answer for that too, because I was also suspicious. So try this. Imagine this is the surface of the earth here. Okay. When plants take carbon dioxide out of the air and then they put it in the plant, right? This is a cycle that stays basically above the ground, right? The plants pull carbon out of the air, they grow, they die, they decompose, and it goes back up into the air. Okay, so this cycle is perfect. What do we do when we get coal or oil out of the ground? We're pulling new carbon out of the ground that was not part of this cycle. We're bringing up and adding carbon to the atmosphere. Okay, so is biomass or biofuel better than bringing coal or oil or natural gas out of the ground? Yes, it is.
I see what you're saying now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's
the coal and oil isn't part of the
that's right.
ecosystem.
That's right. You're bringing it up and you're adding more carbon up into the atmosphere. That's the bad thing. So this finger puppet demonstration that I'm doing of below and above, as above, so below, right? Okay. Well, okay. All right. So actually, that was interesting for me too, because a long time ago, when I actually went on a tour in Southern California of geothermal power plants. It was a clean energy conference. This is maybe 15 years ago or something. And I was very interested. They've got a lot of geothermal down by the Salton Sea, which is part of the Andreas Fault, right? So they've got, that Salton Sea there, you've got a lot of salt water that's on hot areas. So it's a very good geothermal location, right? But they took us on a tour of this algae farm, and they were going to make biofuels out of algae. And they were all excited about this. And I said, yeah, but you're still burning the fuel. Okay, just like you. I was thinking the same thing as you, is that, this is not as good as, let's say, solar energy, which involves no carbon, right? Okay. Anyway, this process we're talking about, the biochar, is what they call carbon negative. Okay, it doesn't add carbon to the atmosphere. It takes carbon directly out of it. We're using the power of having plants and trees suck carbon dioxide out of the air and solidify the carbon dioxide in the air. And then we're taking that and we're making it in a form that we understand does not decay. And then we're putting that under the ground. It's not showing up on my black.
Well, speaking of under the ground,
here, we're putting it down here. Go ahead.
Speaking of under the ground, though, I think of taking advantage of the geothermal. I mean, it doesn't have to be a ginormous deep pit for you to take advantage of geothermal. Even if we made each one of them tiny houses to have a bottom floor, a basement, or something, that you get down, 6, 8 feet in the ground, and it's like 64 degrees all year long. You know what I
That is
mean?
true. That is
That
true.
would cut down the heating bill, and you know,
Yeah, I think I
Oh.
understand that the static temperature, when you get down far enough into the earth where it just isn't going to vary no matter what time of year it is, it's roughly 55 degrees. Okay.
oh,
Which is better than
yeah,
-20. However,
yeah.
and it would be great for you when it's 95 outside. So
Mhm.
you have a good point. I'm not objecting. Okay, that makes sense to use that as a heat sink
Mhm.
when it's too hot and a source of some warmth. But I'm telling you that I don't like it when it's 55 degrees in the house. Okay? That's not comfortable. I'm looking over at my beautiful wife.
No, but it takes a heck of a lot
55 is
less energy to heat to
you are
heat it
right.
up
Okay?
15 degrees
Yes.
than it is,
Yes, you're right. But I'm gonna say, Jason, we've known each other for quite a while, and every once in a while you start bringing up the energy systems, and you're right. Okay, it's just not my zone. Okay, uh,
Right.
and I'm not objecting. I'm not telling you you're wrong or anything, dude. I'm just saying that probably is not what I'm interested in at the moment. Okay, but the questions you had about is this really? Hey, okay. Let me do one other thing. Because you bring up biofuels, there have been a lot of fraud out there. So the example I've given us several weeks in a row now, Jason, is there was a company that was clear cutting forests in British Columbia, chipping the wood up, shipping it by ocean 11,000 miles to England, and burning it as biofuel. And they were going, biofuel, we're saving, coal or whatever. Okay, wait a minute. Stupid. Okay, you're clear cutting forests and you're shipping it 11,000 miles to burn it. Okay, that is not cool. But what they were doing was they were selling some of these carbon credits. Okay, and so the value of carbon credits has taken a crunch recently. I'll give you another example. A few years ago, they were telling us all, if you plant 1,000 trees, you're sucking the carbon dioxide into the trees, right? And we all went, okay, let's go plant a forest, right? And what happened? We started having wildfires. People said, okay, now what's happened to that forest you just grew? All that carbon you sequestered, poof, literally poof, it's back up in the air. So what's happened, Jason, is as people wrestle with this problem of climate change and what to do about the excess carbon in the atmosphere, we've tried some things that have failed, and people are kind of suspicious of carbon capture now because of this. Yeah. Okay, and so we're going to have to go very carefully. I indicated a company called Puro.Earth. And why did I pick them out? They have the absolute highest standards. They are only going to be working on verifying systems that sequester carbon, okay? Not offset, actual sequester. They only do carbon credits for things that are carbon negative, and they do very intricate audits to make sure it's authentic. Okay, and they're so good that what happened? NASDAQ bought them. Why did NASDAQ buy this company? Because there's a market in carbon. So NASDAQ, of course, right, the stock and options and futures, and okay, they're trading and making money off of the value of carbon credits. Carbon credits, when we sequester carbon, we can get cash just for sequestering the carbon. Okay, that's part of our product, is selling the carbon credit. Okay, the other part is selling a composite panel to shelter the homeless. Okay, so we're going to make money if we are authentically sequestering carbon. Okay, that's part of the business plan. Cool.
Okay, so is it really sequester? I mean, because what happens to the panel once it?
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
I mean, I know the other ones go in the landfill and they're fiberglass, so that's not cool. But I
Yeah.
mean, what's going to happen to these ones?
okay, so what I expect is that we do want them to go in a landfill. Why? Because the biochar put in a landfill is definitely going to be safe from so that it never releases its carbon into the atmosphere. We actually want, it's kind of like these companies that are pumping the carbon dioxide deep into the ground and saying that it's going to chemically combine with the rocks and be locked in the rocks forever. We want the biochar to be put into the ground. We're pulling it out of the atmosphere and we want it in the ground. Okay, we don't want to recycle it. We want it in the ground. And it turns out that if you're reading about this, it turns out our percentage of stuff that's getting recycled, even if it's good recyclable plastic, I think we're only getting about 10% of it recycled. So even if you say it could be recycled, people aren't doing it. It's not cost effective. Okay. What are they doing it? They're dumping it. Okay. So we want these things to be dumped in a landfill. Okay. Locally. So don't truck it 1,000 miles. Go to local landfill and put it in the ground. Okay.
Well, just a weird thought, but what if you built it in the ground already? What if you just built it to last forever in the ground already?
Well,
I don't know, it's weird.
Jason, if you want to live underground, maybe Musk wants you to go to Mars, because if you go to Mars, you have to live underground. So, I mean, if you like living in a cave, literally. By the way, one of if you look at I hope, Jason, you've been to the YouTube site. We've got the kickoff meeting that I had. It's about an hour and a half long. But
Yeah, I've seen the first one and most of the second one. So
okay, so what's important there is that composite sandwich, the outer face sheets, the bread and the ham sandwich, those things we want to make out of what's called bio-PET. PET is the stuff that your bottles are made out of, the plastic bottles. Turns out those things last for thousands of years. They last forever. That PET is really tough stuff. And so if we make bio-PET, okay, so we make an epoxy out of plant material, but we turn it into this chemical PET, it lasts for thousands of years. That will be encasing the biochar. So it's like I'm creating a lockbox. Al Gore would love this, right? Lockbox for my carbon. The outside face sheets last forever, holding the hemp or the flax fibers and gluing it together. And in the center, we've got a core. It's like a foam, a bioplastic foam with chunks of biochar in it. Okay, so we're using this. Composite sandwiches are used because they're strong, they're stiff, they're light. Okay, and I'm redesigning it so that it encases the biochar, the carbon, forever. So you take that thing, lazy human, we just dump it in the garbage pit. That's good. We're sequestering the carbon forever. It'll last forever. We already know that plastic is virtually indestructible. The carbon itself doesn't decay. So anyway, it's my spiel, my friend. Okay, we're almost at an hour. Jason, you've had fantastic questions. Luis, you got anything else, dude?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I know that you and I are very far along in our edits. I think we're good to go. I think this is kind of a note to Alan. It seemed to me his spreadsheet where he's tracking the authors and the progress, about 7 of us look like we might be through all of the edits. I think we've got 10 chapters. So there's a few people who need to do their final reviews with Alan. I think that Zach, for example, was trying to get a hold of Ellen to do the final edits, right? So we're getting really close, folks. And I cannot tell you how excited I am to see the book. I'm going to buy the paperback version, okay? There will be an ebook version, and I think that we'll also have a free PDF because I'm tired of asking Luis, does he have a free copy somewhere of whatever paper I want, right? We're going to give it out to whoever wants it for free, okay? All right, so I think that's it. Thank you all for your time. And next Saturday, we'll get together at the same time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
See ya.
Bye-bye.